All right, welcome to FreeThinking Ministries. We're a podcast where we seek to help people to reason together by applying logic and sound theology to all aspects of life. Thanks for joining us today. If you haven't already, please like this video. Even if you haven't even watched it yet, just like it already, get it over with. Subscribe to the channel. We are at a little over 7,000 subscribers. We would like to get to 10,000 by the end of 2026. Hit that notification bell. Invite others to subscribe. When you click the share button, it helps the algorithm. When you like the video, it helps the algorithm. Help us beat the algorithm and get to 10,000 likes ASAP. Also, go to Soul Science Ministries and follow them. Give them some likes.
Do the same thing for Soul Science Ministries.
You can be subscribed
to. Yes.
So today we're going to leap into a reaction video from Alex O'Connor's recent interview with VSauce. Today, we're going to link the full conversation, the full podcast in the description, as we always do. Sometimes I go to these things where people react, and they don't link the video they're reacting to in the description, and I find it very annoying. But we do that because we like to cite our sources here. So you can check out that full conversation. We'll be reacting to a 13-minute clip. It's about identity, and we decided to bring an expert on with soul, personality, personal identity. We've had him on before so many times. Welcome to the show, Dr. Joshua Ryan Farris, once again. And this kind of plays into what we talked about last time you were on.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Go figure.
Now, I think we should mention, for the benefit of our audience, that before we went and started recording, Dr. Farris noted that he has fuzzy brain right now.
Yeah.
It's perfect timing. Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yeah, I don't feel like an expert on anything right now. You ever feel like that?
Oh, most of the time.
I always feel like that.
I'm usually at my best in the morning after my first cup of coffee, ready to go. But then after that, it just starts getting worse and worse. And by nighttime, I'm just
you're useless, huh?
Basically.
Anyway, this is a 13-minute video. And we are going to watch most of it, I think. And as we take a look at this, the whole video is called "Hey, VSauce, Does Nothing Exist?" So the whole conversation is interesting. I haven't watched the entire thing, but we have watched this 13-minute clip. And this clip, I don't know about you guys, it was interesting and frustrating for me to watch because it feels like, the explanation is like right there. It's right there for you to have. And the title of the video is, "Are you still there when you're unconscious?" But that's kind of not exactly what they talk about. But should we get into it? Is there any more preamble we want to get to?
Well, I'll just say this and then let Dr. Farris have the last word before we start the video. I agree with you, Josh, that it was frustrating at times, but I also was captivated by the conversation. And we've talked about Alex O'Connor several times recently. And I'm just impressed with him. I mean, as he was growing up in his early YouTube years, he was kind of insufferable, but he's matured quite a bit. He's now Oxford trained. He's a great thinker. And I think he's moved away from his hard atheism to now something where maybe, I mean, at least say agnostic, but he's very open, it seems, is becoming more and more open to the possibility that theism or even Christian theism could be true, but he still would not affirm that much, it seems to me. But the questions he was asking VSauce, is VSauce, is his name Michael?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, I can look. Yeah. It doesn't matter, does it? Yeah, it matters. It matters a little bit, right? Yeah, his name is Michael Stevens. What does VSauce mean? That sounds really naughty, actually.
I don't know why. Okay.
Doesn't it?
Yes.
It's catchy, though. It's catchy.
It is.
Let's go watch some VSauce.
Alex was talking to Michael VSauce. The questions that he was posing really kind of led to only, it seems to me, only one option, or at least one good explanation that they just weren't discussing. And so we're gonna unpack this as we watch this video. But I just have to give props to Alex O'Connor. I'm really enjoying his videos recently, even if we don't yet see eye to eye, and even if we never do, I really appreciate that. It just seems like he's a more honest interlocutor these days, and trying hard to be a really good philosopher. And I think he's asking great questions here that lead to some amazing conclusions that we're going to unpack. So, Dr. Farris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I didn't know he was Oxford trained. He has been Oxford trained now. He's got a bachelor's at Oxford.
I believe so.
I believe so.
Wow, that's really good. Yeah. Well, his questions, he certainly does know how to ask the right kind of questions that get people's attentions. I mean, I remember when I first watched him, I don't know how long he's been around, but he's been around for a while and he's been big. I thought he was some pipsqueak high school equivalent in England who really thought he knew a lot about the world and philosophy, and then he became really big, though. I mean, obviously people liked watching him. And now he's a lot more thoughtful. I think you're right. He's a lot more articulate and careful and open to having conversations. And this one in particular that was really interesting for a variety of reasons. There does seem to be, like you said, I think an elephant in the room, which is not uncommon in these kinds of discussions. There's an elephant in the room that's just nobody's calling out, nobody's pointing it out. It seems kind of obvious. Why wouldn't they just say it and then at least ridicule it, make fun of it or something? Why wouldn't they just call it out?
Yeah. And I think, Tim, you and I had Believe It or Not on our channel. We reacted to him, but this actually goes exactly contrary to what he claimed, right? Because he was like, well, you are your brain. That's just what you are. You know, he said that. And I think they do a good job of unpacking why that is perhaps not as cut and dried as some of the naturalists think it is. So here we are. This is them. This is a 13-minute clip. We'll watch a few minutes and then we will react. So here we go.
Like a hunch about, I mean, the question of personal identity through time is a big one. But say like right now, right? Like a sort of classic thought in philosophy might be that if I were to cut off your hand, you'd still be there. We could still have this conversation. Right. You might be in a bit of pain, but I'm sure we could manage. Similarly, it feels like I could sort of just get rid of the lower half of your body. It feels like I could shave off your beard and well, maybe you wouldn't be you in an important sense, but in a literal sense, you would be. So maybe it's something to do with the brain, but then again, as you've pointed out in videos as well, you can sort of cut a brain in half and you still sort of get a conscious agent. Like, do you have a hunch as to what you are?
Yeah, we're talking about maximal amputation. How amputated can I be and still be me? At what point do you cut away a brain cell and it's like, oh crap, he's gone? Well, my favorite way to approach it is to do like folk philosophy. Just what would a person say? You look at how we talk about these things, because in a way we actually have solved them. We just don't know that we have, or I shouldn't say solved. We have found a way to cope with that question. Because if I'm trying to think where to begin, I'll just say this. If you're like asleep in the other room and someone says, hey, where is he? I'm like, oh, he's in there. Okay, but you're not consciously aware while you're asleep. But if you die, you're gone. You left us. You passed. But being asleep and being dead are kind of similar in some ways in terms of like, hey, is he like listening to us right now? Is he like capable of doing things? The sleep and death thing encourages me to believe that it's not so much about a set of properties, it's about a set of potentialities.
Okay, so that's the first segment that I want to tackle there. There's a lot there. From maximal amputation. And Dr. Farris, I think you brought this up in we'll link the past conversation we had about your work in the description. But you brought this up. Funnily enough, the examples that Alex brought up was the same one that Tim brought up with his hair, right? Like I lost my hair and I was still me. So it's funny because it was almost the exact same word pictures for what we're thinking about there. So let's tackle that. And then the sleep thing, and this idea that really we're talking about potentiality. What do you guys get from this exchange, this first 2 minutes?
Well, I've never known Sir Tim without with hair. I've never known him with hair. So I don't know. Maybe are you a radically different person now that you don't have hair on your head? You're balding like Doctor Strange, or who was the guy? Who was the guy you were likened to? Doctor Strange has hair, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Who's the guy that's balding that you were likened to on Marvel? I don't know. Never mind.
Yeah.
Nick Fury.
Nick Fury.
Then I need an eye patch.
Yeah.
And other things.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. No, but you're still you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I grew out the hair I had left, I would look like I might start to look like Hulk Hogan a little bit, but I'd still be me.
Long hair.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'd still be able to have this conversation right now.
Did either of you ever watch the cartoon Futurama? Did you ever hear of that cartoon?
I remember hearing of it.
I never watched it, but I'm aware of it.
There's this interesting thing there where they keep past like presidents and past important people alive by putting their heads in jars, and like they keep them alive that way. Mm-hmm. So like their entire body is gone, but their head is still there, and because of that, like they are still there. So they have different historical figures in jars.
Kind of reminds me of that scene in Fallout.
Yeah. Yes.
Season 2. Yes.
Yes. Towards the end there, right? So it's like, okay, is that it? Like we are our heads. He's going to get into something interesting later where he talks about but people don't really think you're gone until you have a heart death. But I think that question really brings in this naturalistic assumption of you are your brain into focus.
Yeah. So he's talking about this maximal amputation thing. And basically the point is this: you can lose a whole bunch of your body. You can lose your hair, you can lose your hands, you could lose your legs, you could lose so much of it. You can even lose a bunch of your brain, but you could still have this conversation. You'd still be here, and it would be you. And so I think the conclusion that we can reach from that is that you do not equal all of your physical parts. And so, especially since that's true of the brain as well, if removing brain matter doesn't remove you, the thing you refer to as I, when you say I think that, then it follows based on logic and the law of identity that you are not identical to your brain. And, so this is more than just philosophical inference here. I mean, Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz has scientifically shown in neuroscience that we actually have the power. The thing you refer to as I has the power to direct your brain. And that means that you are not identical to your brain. So the manner in which we freely choose to think, which is connected to even the name of our organization, FreeThinking Ministries, the manner in which you freely choose to think actually changes your brain structure. And it's not the other way around. So Dr. Farris, tell me what you think of this. I like to compare it to my MacBook. I like to say it this way, that your brain is like your MacBook. It stores information and processes, but it's not you, right? You use it. And I think this might not be a perfect analogy, but it can start to help people see this. The same way that you use your laptop or your phone or whatever, we use our brain in a similar way. So I like to say it this way, that God gave each of us a super powered MacBook in our heads, way better than anything we could get today. But we can use these MacBooks or whatever we want to call them. We can use them for good. We can use them for evil. We can let these computers control us. We see a lot of people who are addicted and controlled by their iPhones today. They're not using their iPhones. It seems like they're enslaved to their iPhones. But in the same way that we can control a computer and use it for good or evil, I think the same thing is true of us and how we choose to use our brains. But if that's the case, then it follows that we are not computers. We're not highly sophisticated computers. And in the same way, we can say that we are not our brains. We simply use them. But bottom line, if you can lose parts of your brain without losing yourself, then that means that you are not your brain. Help me out, Dr. Farris. What do you think?
Well, I agree. I think I think what they're gesturing at is an important point that they're trying to make about maybe the possibilities of a personhood, and the modal possibilities or the possibilities of personhood are not identical to the brain, because, well, the brain could be effectively. Maybe I'm jumping ahead to parts of the video. The brain could be effectively inoperative, and so there could be still evidence of a person still that is present, and you could even kind of resuscitate the person even if their brain is not functioning. They're not actually dead until their heart goes out. I think he actually says that later on. But I think what he's highlighting here is they're highlighting something from what's often called the kind of mereological replacement argument against the view that we are material bodies, or we are, strictly speaking, material in nature. We're physical things through and through. And these thought experiments, or, well, these real life empirical cases that seem to suggest evidence that the person is still present, or we have reason to believe the person is still present, is present even apart from certain parts of their body. So they can lose certain parts, and obviously those certain parts don't make it the case that they go out of existence. So they're not identical to those parts, for sure. They're not even identical to a large segment of the body itself. So they even suggest, well, maybe you could conceive of losing nearly half your body, and maybe we've had even something like real life cases of that in the world, where people were in war and they lost both of their limbs, their legs, and it was still the person was still there, still operative, and we have good evidence that the person's still there, and the person exists and persists even beyond the losing kind of the bottom half of their body. They're still present. So there's an important intuition that they're gesturing toward in terms of what it is that makes you you, and it's or what it is that you are identical to, and it doesn't seem to be the parts of your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, think about that song, I think from the late 80s from Metallica, called One. Are you guys familiar with that song? I mean, it's about this soldier who had his limbs blown off in war. He lost his sight. He lost his ability to speak. He lost his hearing. Basically lost all senses, but he's still there.
Yeah,
he's suffering, right? He's still there, but with no way of communication. I mean, I encourage people to go listen to this song. It's a beautiful, sad, powerful song, but with some philosophical implications as well. But yeah, I mean, this person lost all of his parts and so many of his properties, but he's still there. That substance of the person who can say, I think that, or I feel that, even if he can't say it because he doesn't have the ability to say it anymore, he can still think it. He's still a thinking thing. And so I think that is best explained by the soul. I know that I speak for both of you, especially you, Dr. Farris, on that matter. But you know, and let me touch on what he brought up between being asleep and being dead. And he's trying to make say that they're very similar things, but not from a substance dualist perspective. They're not similar at all. I mean, first of all, when I'm sleeping, I can still possess intentional states of consciousness when I dream. I'm still experiencing mental activity and experiencing sometimes even what it's like, even though it's not actually happening. Sometimes waking up thinking it actually happened. But I think it's right to say when somebody's sleeping in the next room and you ask, hey, where's Josh? I can say, oh, he's in the next room taking a nap. Whereas you're still there because according to substance dualism, the mind and soul, or I'm sorry, the mind and the body have not been separated. When you're dead, when we say a person's dead, according to substance dualism, the soul or the mind has survived the death of the body and the brain. And so you, the thing you refer to as I on that view, are literally no longer there. You're gone. The body is there. The body and the brain is still there, but you are not there. And so I think that's a much better way of understanding the difference between sleeping and death. What do you guys think?
Yeah, and he also said that, well, I think the difference between sleeping and death is just potentiality. Like if you're sleeping, you have the potentiality of being awake and then doing something more.
Because you're still there.
Yeah, you're still so
the soul is there.
And it was interesting because he said this doesn't, well, we solved it. Oh wait, no, we didn't solve it. We're coping with it. And,
that's right. It's a coping mechanism.
The way we cope with it is to say, well, really what being alive is, what being conscious is, what being a person is recognizing that there's potentiality there, which would undermine any pro-choice argument, but put that aside. Because if that's a person, then potentiality is in the womb and you can't eliminate that. So
very good.
So naturalistically you should be pro-life. If that's consciousness and personhood. But it seems to me that that's also just intuitively not enough. Like this idea that personhood is conveyed through potentialities seems hollow in a sense. What do you think, Dr. Farris?
Yeah, well, you guys already went there. So I was going to say the big elephant in the room is the soul, right? There's no soul that's mentioned. They don't go there. And so that seems to be the metaphysical explanation of thinking and consciousness itself, and it seems to be a better explanation. I do think, and well, I'll set this aside for the moment, I do think they're pressing into a deeper metaphysical problem that is actually perplexing for everyone, even substance dualists. But the fact that they didn't mention, Tim brought up substance dualism, the fact that they didn't mention that view or refer to the fact of souls or mental substances as distinct seemed kind of interesting and funny to me. Why they wouldn't even mention that as a possibility or suggest it, floated as a possible idea that could provide some explanatory resources for these sorts of things. So I think that's funny in itself. I do think what they're gesturing toward in this thought experiment about mereological replacement does seem to, I mean, I'm not sure if it takes it directly to substance dualism, but substance dualism seems like an obvious kind of place to go in terms of providing explanatory resources or providing best explanation or something like that for these thought experiments, and for the fact that we can experience mereological replacement of the various parts of our body that comprise whatever our body is, our whole, and yet be not identical to those things. But that raises the more kind of nuanced question: to what extent could we be identical to the whole but not the parts? And I think one thing that they keep going back to, and maybe they'll get to this more, is this question about sleeping and dreaming and whether or not we have what the distinction there is. They seem to conflate or assume that consciousness equals current awareness in some way. But that's certainly a category mistake. I think a person can, now whether he does, different question. I think a person can exist without being presently conscious, just as we exist during dreamless sleep. Or if there is such a thing as dreamless sleep. I mean, there's certainly times when we're sleeping and whatever's going on in our brain, we don't, or whatever's going on in our mind, we don't have awareness of. We certainly don't remember in the morning. But the deeper question is not, are you aware, but what grounds personal identity itself? What is it that grounds personal identity? Where is the identity rooted? It seems to be rooted in the self or the subject itself that is non-identical to the parts of the body and arguably the whole body. There's nothing in the whole body there's no garden variety object, namely the whole body itself, that would be sufficient for identifying you, or that we could pick out and say that's you. There's not even a brain part or a neuron that we could go to and point, some mysterious neuron in the brain that we could point to and say, conceivably, that's you. And I don't think we ever will. So, yeah, what's the ground for personal identity? So they're kind of gesturing there, and they're saying a lot of things that seem like, well, this is an obvious place to point in the direction of substance dualism, but they never want to go there, it seems.
Yeah, I had it written down. It's like, it feels like Occam's razor here could be. Yeah. What's the simplest explanation that can account for all the data? That seems to be the obvious place to go. Let's move on to the next segment, if you're okay with that. This one's a shorter clip, but it's just a few seconds after they have the dream conversation.
I was reading some surveys from doctors about, like, when does a family accept that they have lost a loved one? Mm-hmm. And it's not when brain damage occurs. It's when the heart stops. Mm. And I thought is that just a old traditional kind of belief that, like, well, the heart is life and the brain is just, like, cools the blood. I don't know if anyone from Aristotelian times is still around, but what I'm saying is, deep inside of us, we think of the heart as being, once the heart's gone, it's over. Mm-hmm. What do you mean the brain death? Well, then, they're still alive. We can keep them alive with feeding tubes and stuff. Yeah. And I think that.
Okay, so we kind of hinted at this earlier, but this is this idea of intuitively, we seem to think, hey, if someone's when someone's dead, it's really when their heart stops, not just when their brain is no longer functioning optimally or at all. What do you guys make of this?
I like to describe it as that the soul uses the brain, as I said earlier. So now, if the brain is destroyed, I would, if somebody's brain was destroyed, I'm like, well, okay, even if their heart was still pumping, I'd be like, okay, it's over. I don't know what most people are going to say on the street. But it seems to me that if the brain is still, if the heart's pumping, the brain has a chance to be working. And if the brain is working, that is, if it's something that is not damaged or could be repaired, then the soul could use it. And continue, and eventually continue life again. That's just my thoughts off the top of my head. What do you think, Dr. Farris?
Yeah, so I guess there is a deeper question: is in what sense is the person still there? But in the deepest metaphysical sense, if there was a previous interaction between the person and the body, then you might hold out hope that if the heart is beating, then the person is still present in the body. The person is still around, so we need to keep them around. We need to, even if they're not the same person in other senses, they're kind of distant. If there's a lack of continuity between consciousness or character or memory states, then we would have to say, if the person is still there, we're presuming the person is still there when their heart is beating, then it's not continuity itself that is accounting of personhood. It's not continuity itself that we would identify the person with. There's something undergirding that is the person. There's something else going on. there's something, again, a soul or something like that, an immaterial substance that is the thing that attaches itself to the body, interacts with the body, and that thing has certain properties itself. But there's something deeper about this, like when you combine the sleeping problem with the evidence of the heart, or the heart being a kind of sign that somebody's still present, where if the person is immaterial, where is that person? I mean, commonsensically, we can say, yeah, the person just seems to be there in the same body, but without some sort of empirical or evidential criterion, how would we know that the person is present? There's something weird about saying, I think commonsensically it's true. If I say, somebody's asleep, dead asleep in the other room, right? Metaphorically, dead asleep in the other room, then I'm saying, yeah, their body's in the other room, and I'm presuming that they're present. But if their mental states are such that there's something important about their mental states that makes them them, then are they really physically present? Are mental things, or mental properties, mental events, the kinds of things that are physically or spatially located in the way that the body is located? And if it's not, then we're having to do some kind of metaphysical gymnastics to make sense of the fact that they're present there. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
it was interesting because he said, I don't know why people think that. Maybe they think that the heart makes the body go, the brain cools the body, because he's thinking in purely naturalistic terms. Why do people think that? Mm-hmm. And I would say, well, I think most people don't function naturalistically in their everyday lives. And so the real reason why people think that is because they think there's a spiritual component going on. You keep the person alive, their heart alive, because there seems to be some sort of connection to their physical body and their spiritual body. And so if they're somehow present, so I can say goodbye to them. You've seen that where people have been kept alive till a family member can come and say goodbye, and then they unplug the machines, and then they pass away, right? And so I think there is just he's carrying with himself some naturalistic presuppositions to why people think this way. And I tend to think that, well, most people don't think intuitively, naturalistically. They're going to think,
I think you're right. Yeah.
More spiritually. And so they're holding on to hope that when I say goodbye, I'm saying goodbye to the person, even if they're not in the body, they're somewhere around here. Even if they're not a Christian, right?
That's right. I think that's an important point. Yes, I think that's an important point, Josh, that the discussion is carrying along in a way that it moves us beyond you or just your current brain state. Mm-hmm. So if your brain functioning is effectively inoperative, but your heart is still beating, intuitively we take it that the person is still there, or there's still hope that the person is there at least. And at that point, you've moved beyond any sort of view of the person as a material part, or even a part being the body itself, or even the brain. You've moved on to some sort of continuity. The biological organism itself is somehow continuous because the heart is still beating. Right?
Yeah. Tim, you have anything to add, or should we go to the next?
Yeah, let's keep going for the sake of time.
Yeah. And never walk again, but you're still you. But if your heart stops, there's no potential for you to do anything again, even in a different way, like you would if you lost part of your brain.
Yeah. I mean, like losing memory seems like a really important example here. Like somebody who can't remember what happened to them yesterday or 5 minutes ago. There's this guy called Clive something.
Okay, let's stop it there. We're not going to go into the whole Clive situation, but they bring up an interesting thing here where he talks again. He goes back to the potentiality thing, right? Where, hey, if you could potentially do something, that means you're really alive. And so if your heart is beating, then you could potentially, we talked about that. The soul could potentially use the body, or you could all of a sudden the brain could start functioning at least in a way that could keep somebody alive, and they could do something in the future. But it's interesting because then they go to the memory loss thing, and they go to this guy named Clive who has a 7-second memory. I don't know if this is a real person or not, but they treat him as if he is. And then the question is Clive still the same Clive every 7 seconds, or is he someone different? I'm thinking of like 50 First Dates. You remember that movie with Adam Sandler? Like,
right.
Hey, we hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. Hey, please do us a favor. Check and see if you're subscribed. If you're not, a lot of you aren't, but if you're not, please subscribe, hit that notification bell. We'll get back to the episode in just a second, but we can only exist also because of viewers like you, people who support our channel. So you can go to freethinkingministries.com/donate and you can be a part of the team. We'd love to put you on our email list as well. Okay, now back to the conversation.
Yeah, you bring up 50 First Dates. We can also think of Born Identity. Everybody's familiar with that. So here's a guy that loses his memories of the past. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know his name. He finds himself with certain skills. He doesn't know how he got these skills, but he has no idea who he is. But I think, again, this is where substance dualism provides a better explanation. The brain has been damaged, right? The computer, as it were, has been damaged. But the same person is there, just doesn't have access to a functional brain right now. And so the same person who's experienced these things in the past, even though he can't recall them right now, but it's still the same thinking thing. The same mental substance is still there. So it makes sense on substance dualism. I don't think it's making sense on naturalism. On naturalism, pure in a robust naturalistic sense, does seem to be a different person. But if substance dualism is true, no, it's the same thinking thing, the same experiencer, the same thing that says, I think that, or I can't remember anything. Or if he gets his memories back, he says, now I remember. It's that same thinking thing that is somehow connected to the body and using the body, using the brain that is going through these different states. So bottom line, you don't become a new person every time you forget something. Now,
even if you forget all of the things.
Yeah, I mean, that's intuitive, right? But I think that the robust naturalist has to say, you actually do become a new person every time you forget something, or every time you learn something new or experience something new. Whereas in substance dualism, we don't have that problem. What do you think, Dr. Farris?
I think that's right. Unless we substantialize thoughts themselves, right? We make thoughts, as fleeting as thoughts are, we make those substances. If that's the case, then the persistence of identity of one thought to the next thought is in constant flux. Yeah, kind of like a fold in the river. There, even in the discussion, they've moved beyond the kind of materialistic view of personal identity, that you are identical to parts, or you're identical to either body parts or to brain parts, or even the brain itself, into a different view that requires some kind of continuity. It's interesting. I'm reminded of the Twilight Zone episode. What was it? There's one episode where the wife and the husband comes home from work one day, and he has all the same bodily attributes. He sounds the same, has certain continuous thoughts that are the same, certain character states that are the same. But this is a flip side to this is another way of looking at the problem, but he's just different. And there's no way to empirically make determinate that he's different. She can't prove it. But she knows her husband well enough to know that yeah, this guy's not the same guy. This is either an alien who's inhabited the body, has somehow downloaded, a lot of the same traits or continuity, or this is the same guy in one sense, but from a different world, possible world, and somehow he's collided with this world and taken over, and now he's living in this world with her, and she knows he's like deep down in the deepest recesses of her being, she knows he's not the same person, although on all surface, every empirical indicator would say that he is the same.
Yeah, I think that gets us right into the next clip that I wanted to play, because it's the if I were a worm, would you still love me? I'll have them explain it.
Of both. I mean, we said like there isn't really this thing called a table. We just sort of decide when to call it a table and how much of it we'd have to take away until it's no longer a table. We're doing the same kind of thing with people. Like you've kind of just got, you can take away this and you can take away that, and whether they're alive or dead or still the same person kind of just depends on your context and function.
Yeah, right. Like there's the whole like, would you love me if I was a worm?
Yeah, right.
That question is actually pretty deep because well, what do you mean?
What does that even mean?
If you were a worm?
Yeah.
And I think that the average person means if my conscious experience was inside the body of a worm. They just mean my body changed, because they don't think of the body as being them. They can lose an arm, they can gain weight or lose weight, and they're still them.
Mm-hmm.
They can be a worm and it's still them. The thing that isn't changing is the internal world.
Okay.
This is perplexing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dr. Farris, would you still love me if I were a worm? Would you still be my doctoral supervisor if I were a worm? For I am a worm and not a man.
I would, Josh. I'd still.
How would you?
The amount of hesitation.
Awesome. I would love to have a worm over here behind that microphone, and that would actually.
How would you know?
Well,
if I were a worm,
no. How would you know it was still Josh though? If you were a worm, that would be presumably he wouldn't be able to talk.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, he wouldn't be able to communicate that he's. Hey, I'm really the same, Josh.
Well, this is interesting though, because like they get in. This is the part of the conversation where it feels like they get right to the edge of acknowledging the element, because no longer are they talking about potentialities. They're talking about, well, if my consciousness, people don't think of themselves as their bodies, they think of themselves as consciousness. Mm-hmm. And if my consciousness is transported to a worm, would you still love me?
And we could take this step. Yeah, we could take this one step back, and this does raise a question about agency and continuity. There's still continuity. If you think about the movie Face Off, and so John Travolta is married and he's a cop and he's going to go undercover, and of course the story. They're surgically able to remove the face and put it on, and even change the body type and the scars, so that he can go undercover as what's the criminal's name who Nicolas Cage is playing. John Travolta is effectively, at least in terms of body and face and things like that, he's effectively able to go undercover by taking on the guy's body. And then he can do that, so he can go work with his underground crime communities and get evidence on him and get evidence on them. And so in the movie, what's interesting is it raises these kind of perplexing questions. Eventually he confronts his wife, and she knows something's wrong with the guy who's inhabited her husband's body. There's something wrong there. She kind of feels it, senses it, intuits it, right? But then he comes in, and he's the one who killed, who's this criminal, and his body, has the body that killed their son, right? I think, in the story. And so there's a lot of like emotional baggage to overcome. And so eventually he says, look, I'm your husband. Despite all appearances, this is hard to get over, I know. I'm your husband.
Castor Troy.
Castor Troy. That was on the tip of my tongue. Castor Troy. Yeah, so he's Castor Troy. Castor Troy in the story killed their son. For some reason, they knew it, but they couldn't prove it or something. I can't remember all the details. But her husband took on Castor Troy's body, and he's trying to go underground. Things get wrecked, and like he can't switch back. There's more details in the story. So things get really convoluted and complicated in the story. And so he's going to his wife and like trying to convince her, look, it doesn't look like it. I'm not Castor Troy. I'm actually your husband. And eventually she comes around and she's like, oh, it is you. How?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, what is that you? Yeah. What is that you? That's you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nice.
And this gets into the conversation that they have a little bit later. Maybe we won't play the full clip, but they talk about the idea of downloading your conscious abilities into your mortal enemy, and then if all of your memories, all of the potentialities, all into your enemy, and then your enemy's conscious abilities into your bodies. Which one? And then you're going to torture. Which one do you want to be tortured? Mm-hmm. And VSauce says, "Well, I would rather have my body, my former body, be tortured than the mortal enemy's body, because now all of my conscious memories and thoughts are now inhabiting that body." And I find that interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, even taking part in that thought experiment seems to assume, I guess, that it's, or even seems to imply that it's logically possible in some sense. And so if it's even logically possible for your consciousness, what I think we would call the soul.
I was going to say, he doesn't say consciousness, though. He's very specific. He says, all of my conscious thoughts and memories.
Okay.
So I would say that's a consciousness, but it seems to me that he's boiling down.
Didn't he say if my conscious experience was in a worm? That's what I wrote down in my notes.
That's what he says about the worm, but I'm talking about the...
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So he does say conscious experiences.
Yeah.
If that wasn't a worm. Well, here's the thing. I think it's most people intuit or assume that they could be in a different body other than themselves. I mean, if they've seen Freaky Friday or so many other types of movies that we could point to, I'm sure Freaky Friday is the one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
If you can even sit down and say there's nothing logically impossible with this, even if you don't think that it's how reality works, if you can conceive of it, just that conception, just saying I can conceive of this, even if you say, but this surely isn't true, but I can conceive of it, you're, as JP Moreland says, and we get into this in the paper that he and I wrote together. We shared one of his arguments from his arguments for the soul. And it has to do with if you can strongly conceive of yourself surviving the death of your body or existing apart from your body, if you can strongly conceive of yourself existing apart from your brain, then that proves that based on the law of identity, ultimately that you have good reason to think you're not your brain anyway, if he's going to be humble with his conclusions there. But yeah, I mean, people assume they could be in different bodies and still be themselves, but that assumption only makes sense if you're not identical to your body. And when we're talking about this consciousness being the seat of identity, I mean, it seems to me that we locate, because I'm always talking about that thing in which you refer to as I. When you say I think that, we're talking about first person perspective. I think that's what we locate identity in, is the first person perspective. But look, if consciousness simply equals brain activity, then you can't move it without moving the brain or without the brain being moved. But bottom line, if you can even imagine existing apart from your body or in another body, whether it's another human's body or a worm or any other animal, if you can imagine existing in another body at all, then it seems you've already rejected at least strict physicalism.
Well, and in that thought experiment of being downloaded into your enemy's body, it's not a brain transplant. You're not moving brains, right?
Yeah.
He's
saying same with Freaky Friday. There was no brain transplant.
Yeah, we just watched that movie. My wife and kids and I watched that movie.
I've actually never seen that movie either.
So it's okay. You don't have to. But it's like this experience where the consciousnesses are flipped, right? And so now it's like, well, I'm still me, but I'm in a different body. That might be disorienting, but we can all conceive of that, right? Yeah. And so it seems at least that's possible, unless we can all conceive of something that is illogical or impossible, which I guess could be the case. It does seem kind of illogical to say if I were a worm, but that the same principle applies. Dr. Farris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a couple issues here. One of the things that I bring up in an introduction to theological anthropology is the thought experiment from Being John Malkovich. And so this is just a way to pump modal intuitions. So we're talking about possibilities as being indicative of something that is there. And we all are in agreement that something that is there is probably best explained by a soul or an immaterial substance that is has the ability or the power to think and to reason and the like. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable explanation. In the Being John Malkovich, there's this floor in this building where people can go and slide down this slide, and in effect doing that, they can be uploaded to their consciousness can be uploaded to John Malkovich's body. So a bunch of people do this all at once, and there's multiple people in his body, and females as well as males. And so it actually it raises all sorts of conceptual possibilities about, well, even if I've experienced my life phenomenologically as a female, could I experience through the life of a male body? And so
wow.
There was an interesting
I don't want to go down that line too much, but right now, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say there's an interesting EPS paper that I don't know, Tim, if you were there. I can't remember the name of the gentleman that did it, but basically his argument was that we have gendered souls. And so that would maybe be impossible.
Yeah, I mean, it would. Well, if our body swapping intuitions are indicative of something that is true about us, whether or not it is actually possible, it could be conceptually possible. So there's still something important to be said here about what it is that is personal identity, and what it is that kind of makes me and what makes you, that is distinct from the body itself. So maybe there are some conceptual distinctions here that are important to the discussion about whether or not it is possible or not. I mean, maybe if your soul is gendered and you're a female soul, why couldn't you be mismatched in a different body? There would be some malfunctioning there, but maybe it's still a possibility. But we don't want to go down that trail of thought right now too much, right? We don't want to go
That's
down
another podcast.
That's a different one. But I think there's an important fact about you that makes you, and the fact that makes me, that is still important there in the conceptual distinctions, the conceptual possibilities, even if it's not an actual possibility. So this raises a couple of important questions about, okay, if our modal intuitions are such that there are these possibilities, even if they couldn't be actualized in the real world, then there's still something to be said that's important about the nature of personal identity, about what makes you and what makes me, that needs to be grasped in these thought experiments. Now, the separate question, you could still be and this doesn't mitigate against substance dualism. You could still be a substance dualist and say this. You could say that the substance of the soul could exist. It is the thing that provides the undergirding explanation for continuity itself, whether it be physical continuity or memory continuity or conscious continuity. It's the thing that undergirds it. But you might also say, and this is the thought experiment, because of our attachment to our body and how deep that is, at least functionally, maybe our souls, what makes us us, always does depend upon at least some parcel of matter to continue to exist. And so it wouldn't render actual, it would render the possibility there, at least in a minimalist sense, that it's conceptually possible that I could be disjointed from my body or disconnected from my body, even if I couldn't actually be disconnected from my body. So somebody like E.J. Lowe would affirm this kind of position. E.J. Lowe affirms some kind of substance dualism position, that there are two distinct substances that have that are characterized by two distinct types of events, one mental events, one physical events. But there's something about the deep matter form arrangement between the two, such that the mind always depends upon some parcel of matter, and there's always going to be an ambiguity about what that is, or what parcel of matter would be sufficient for the dependence relation of the mind on the brain or the mind on the body. Nonetheless, there seems to be some sort of dependence relation for the mind to continue or to persist. So on his view, it doesn't seem like there's an actual possibility for the mind to be separated from the body and then as a result to survive body death, somatic death. But nonetheless, there's still something important to be had in those distinctions, those modal distinctions between personal identity and bodily identity. Yeah.
Interesting. I think of that like in sci-fi. Like we're talking a lot. I think sci-fi does a great job of exploring a lot of these thoughts, a lot of these ideas, because I think in every sci-fi movie that I've seen where like a consciousness is downloaded to a computer or something like that, there's plenty of those where all of a sudden you're in a computer. Every time they're screaming, "Let me out!" Like get me back into a body. Like it's this idea of I can visualize myself in that state, but that's not the ideal state. Like I would still want to be tethered to something material. Otherwise, I would feel disconnected. I would feel incomplete, as it were. So there is something to be said to that. I had a professor in seminary that posited the idea that eternal separation with God or from God, so hell, is actually this: you have to live through the rest of eternity in the disembodied state. And it was an interesting idea that you're always lacking something. You're lacking in that bodied state. You're always lacking, and no matter what you want, the reason you thirst and you want somebody to quench your thirst, like the story of the rich man and Lazarus, is because you remember the desire for water and thirst, but you have no actuality of slaking that. And so you even if someone gave you water, it wouldn't do anything. It's kind of like the Pirates of the Caribbean, where they're undead and they try to eat to fill their soul with their body with food, but they're just dead. So that's interesting too, because it's like, well, if you're outside of the body, then you're not completely whole. And I guess this is kind of different than what they're talking about, but it does get into this this cloning aspect.
Oh, can you hear that?
I think that's you, Joshua.
It is me. Yeah, you could hear that.
Yep. I started dancing.
I still haven't figured out this connection between this new phone and the laptop. It connects at some points, but then it's not connected at other points. It's like it's this whole interface problem. It's like I guess it's kind of like my mind and my body. Sometimes my mind does not seem to be interfacing with my body. And in other times when I don't want it to be interfacing with my body, it does.
Fair enough. That was a good spin back into it.
Yeah. See, yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
That was a helpful distraction for a moment, maybe, wasn't it?
Yeah. Do we want to do one more clip, or do we want to?
Well, I do want to ask this question. Like, there is something strange, and I don't know how much time we have for this, but like, I do wonder about this. Like, I did write a paper for a theological journal years ago about a theology of personal identity, and I was criticizing the famous theological anthropologist David Kelsey, in his book The Eccentric Existence, where he argues that something like, what's the criterion? Irreducible uniqueness or something is required to get at personal identity, this theological conception of personal identity. And I criticized it and said, no, that's not, you're not going far enough. I said, effectively, what we want in the person is not just how the person walks and talks and even how the person smells, but we want that person. And there's something deeply mysterious about the personhood that is also fundamental, basic to the person, metaphysically basic. And so all these theological accounts, of which this was a prime example, David Kelsey in his Eccentric Existence, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's really popular theological anthropology out there. It just doesn't get to the heart of the matter, it seems to me, where a soul is required, something like a soul is required. But on the other hand, I have this dueling intuition. You like that? Dueling. Yeah, dueling intuition that, if I wasn't in the same body, if I did a body swap, would my wife still want me? I'm not sure.
She might not be attracted to you anymore, but I bet she'd still love you and try to take care of you.
I hope so.
Want the best for you. Well, I mean,
I hope so, but I'm not always so sure. Not with her. I'm not trying to bring that up, but I'm not trying to make it too personal. But I mean, there is something about like the body that you become accustomed to, such that if you were there's a severing there. If you were so severed from your body, like we have vegetable cases, like maybe the person's still there, maybe they're not there, and where somebody is their caretaker, their spouse effectively leaves them, or has a conjugal or a relationship with somebody else, because that body that is present seems to be so severed from the person that they just can't reconcile it realistically, right?
I mean, I'm sure if me as a soul was somehow put into Chris Hemsworth's body, my wife is still going to love me.
Wait,
what about Jay Leno's body?
Is Chris Hemsworth a good-looking guy like you?
He's Thor. Is that Thor?
He's okay, I guess. He plays Thor. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's pretty good looking, right? So she might get over it. Yeah.
Yeah. What about Jay Leno's body, though?
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That changes things, doesn't it? Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know.
I think
it does. It could.
So I do think there are still problems, obviously, as we think about this, but it seems to me that the explanations that they're giving, they're hinting at consciousness, but they have the best definition that they've given, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh and Tim, is that consciousness equals the potentiality to do things. Is that kind of what they've said, or or have they not even tried to define consciousness?
No, I think they've said that, but I think that misses the mark. I think it's much better to say the soul is what provides potentiality here. I mean, if I'm a soul created in the God's image, an omnipotent God who has multi potentials, I mean, that's what is all potential, omnipotent. And if we're created in that likeness, then at least we've got some potentials. And so I think that's real power that we have, and that's what gives the potentialities, is our power to do one thing instead of another, our power to freely think and consider all the data and be more careful while we're thinking things through, do our due diligence, bracket biases, be aware of our emotional attachments to certain views and try to carefully reason to the truth, even if the truth is something that we don't want it to be. Can we still get it? I mean, this is what I argue is libertarian free thinking, which we can't have if we're not conscious subjects in the first place. But it's more than, I just gave a paper about this at the recent EPS on a panel talking about Dr. Farris's book and connecting my work to it. And really showing how our two fields of study really kind of meet and work really well together. And now we're writing a book together on this topic.
It's going to be a bestseller.
Bestseller, New York Times bestseller. We're going to be filthy rich.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, well,
that's the goal.
Millions
That's all authors want, right? At the end of the day, yes. So hopefully we can have some modest success with it. But New York Times bestseller. Yeah, I think you can pay like what, $75,000 to make it a bestseller.
Well, Mark Driscoll paid $250,000. So
250. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Mark Driscoll did. So, and he's around pretending like he didn't do anything wrong. Anyway, moving on. Do we want to talk about the clone part of the video, or should we end it here?
The clone part. I do think
he wants to destroy his enemies' clones. Or doesn't want to.
Maybe I do want to real quick reiterate the point that you guys were just making and that Tim was just making about this. Certainly, it's commonsensical, intuitive. I think the intuition is a deep, intractable kind of intuition that is stronger than a mere belief. So, I mean, if we're thinking about, kind of epistemology of beliefs, there's certain kinds of beliefs that are more likely true than others. So George Beeler talks about this idea of intuitions as having kind of it being kind of a more deeply embedded belief. Belief may not even be the right term, but intuitions are so deeply embedded that it would be hard to they signify something that is probably true or more likely true. They're harder to get out of our epistemic kind of wherewithal. And so something like this idea that persons actually persist through sleep, through anesthesia, through the interruption of mental states, through even the changing of mental states. And you could have different kinds of mental states, some mental states that are even kind of more deeply ingrained mental states, like certain self-conceptions I have, conceptions I have of myself. Some are more deeply ingrained than others. And even through the change of those, as I go through life and I experience certain kinds of suffering or something, and I was once a young, confident man, and that confidence in some areas of life have kind of been beaten down over time. There's something about that interruption. There's something about me that persists through even those deeper mental states. There is, it seems, an enduring subject, a self that grounds the personal identity itself. So that seems to be the deepest metaphysical problem, of which something like a soul provides the best explanation. Now, if it's not the explanation, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily, that line of argument doesn't entail that it's necessarily true. It's just to say that it is the best possible explanation.
Abductive.
There's, or we might even say, put it in an inductive way, that there's lots of good evidence that's suggestive of the fact that it is true. But there's another issue about the nature of consciousness that I think their conflation, that we brought this up at the beginning, and I think it carries itself along throughout the discussion. There seems to be this kind of conflation of consciousness with present awareness. So philosophers talk about this too, like episodic awareness. And I don't think you should conflate those two. Consciousness is, I'm not sure consciousness is the deepest metaphysical issue. The substance of the person is the deepest metaphysical issue, but consciousness comes really close. But I think there's different kinds of consciousness. And just because you might not be presently aware doesn't mean that you're not conscious. even if we don't have sort of third-person ways of determining whether you're conscious or not. We might be conscious in other ways. I do think we're conscious in some ways when we're sleeping. That's why we're having dream states, but it's a different kind of conscious state, right? Or even when you're not dreaming, or at least dreaming in a way that's vivid, certainly that you would remember, you might have underlying, you could speak in a kind of transcendental way. There's kind of underlying subconscious or unconscious that is actually a state of consciousness, you might say. That is rooted in something itself already, something that's rooted in your underlying conscious structure. So Richard Swinburne, in his book, which I think his book was really helpful. Of course, he's had more sophisticated arguments since then for the soul, but his really interesting book was called The Evolution of the Soul. And in that, he talks a lot about moral psychology and the fact that souls themselves bear a sort of important structure, a consciousness structure that's inherited from the body that has that provides kind of layers of deep functionality to the soul, right? Such that you might have like strong kind of structured consciousness, a consciousness that is structured, that gives rise to certain degrees of beliefs. And so, right, you could even have subconscious beliefs, and we know people have subconscious beliefs, right? I mean, we can run tests and say that they're, whether or not they're aware of it or even presently aware of it, they have underlying beliefs sometimes about themselves that they've suppressed over time, right? So to even talk about consciousness as conflated with present awareness seems mistaken, because consciousness seems far more vast and in some ways murky, yet real, but murky, and there's a lot more possibilities with it than our own present awareness. I believe I'm conscious through lots of different states, but I'm not directly aware of something, or I'm not presently aware of something. There's deep underlying sort of there's a deep underlying reality to consciousness that is even above or transcends my own kind of direct or present awareness of consciousness itself.
Would you say that consciousness is, we need something to ground consciousness? It is not just because it seems like they're treating it as a thing in and of itself, where we can somehow transfer this thing in and of itself that's consciousness to another body. But I think like what we're saying is, well, consciousness belongs to something. It's not a thing in and of itself. It's what we experience, but it's what we experience, right?
Yes.
And so I can be unaware but still conscious, because the consciousness is not what defines me. Does that make sense? It's the me that is. So even when I'm asleep, or even when I'm put under for surgery, I'm in anesthesia, I'm not conscious of anything that's happening. But that doesn't mean I cease to be a person in that instance. The consciousness is something I have. It's something I experience that informs my personhood, but it is not in and of itself personhood. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think
consciousness is a property.
Yeah.
Consciousness is a property or a power. Yeah, there is something about me that makes me me, that is not a thing in the sense that we normally think of things. So this is why theologians like Robert Spaman, I think his book is insightful. It's called Persons. Philosophers and Robert Spaman don't typically talk to each other, but I think his book has something insightful to say. He says that there is something different about you that makes you a someone that something just doesn't quite capture. It never will. And I think that's right. So I'm not sure if you and your consciousness, which is so at one level so basic to you. I mean, Descartes seems to think this as well, something like this, but it's not you, but it's close to you, is not something that can be commodified and controlled in the way that anything else or in ordinary object can be controlled, so that you could just pick it up and transfer it. Now, I mean, there's a trivial sense in which obviously that's true. I mean, if consciousness is something that is a kind of commodifiable thing that we can somehow grasp, then of course it's going to be more complicated to figure out how to transport consciousness. That's trivia. But I think what we're getting at is like, no, there's something deeper about it, that it can't be controlled in the same way that like God can't be controlled. Not in the same way, I should say, not in the same way, but in a similar way, maybe in a similar way that God cannot be controlled and commodified and transported by some sort of scientific mechanism or something like that. It's just something, yeah, I don't know. It's something deeper than that we're kind of trying to scratch at right now. It's something deeper. It's, you are a somebody. No, you're not. You're a someone. You're a someone rather than a something, right? You're a someone, right?
Yes, you're a some person.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
All right, maybe we can come back to the would you punish your enemy clone rather than your enemy at a different time. But I feel like we are running up against it right now, going for about an hour and a half. Let's give some closing remarks, and then we can be done. One of the closing remarks I would like to make is, hey, if you found this insightful, like this video, share, subscribe to the channel. Go to soulscienceministries.com. Find all of Dr. Joshua Ryan Farris's books there. FreeThinkingMinistries.com as well. Go to FreeThinkingMinistries.com/donate if you want to be a part of the team, so that we can continue to bring this content to you, and you can actually bring us to you if you go to the contact us form and you contact us. We would love to come to you and have these sorts of conversations. Perhaps we would bring Dr. Farris with us to have a conversation on anthropology and consciousness. So reach out there. All right, gentlemen, final closing thoughts on this video and what we've discussed here.
Yeah, I'll go first, so we give Dr. Farris the last word here. I know we didn't talk about the whole cloning thing, but since you mentioned it, I just got to say that justice, it seems to me that most of us would understand that justice requires a continuing self, not just copied information. And so if we were able to get a clone of Hitler, even give that physical body that looks just like him with the same DNA, give him his past memories, punishing that clone would not be punishing the same person who did the Holocaust. And so we would be literally missing the mark right there. But I know we didn't get into that, but I was looking forward to talking about that. So we'll talk about that at some other point. You know, I think this is a fantastic topic to think deeply about. I loved watching this little segment between Alex O'Connor and VSauce. And really I was
special sauce.
Yeah. I was really impressed with Alex O'Connor and the way he and the questions he was asking. And it really seemed, and I can only assume that VSauce is kind of a naturalist or a physicalist or something along those lines. I don't know for sure, but that's my assumption. But it seems to me that the questions that Alex was asking got him to a place where he was, even if he wasn't aware of what he was doing, he was kind of implying the existence of the soul or substance dualism or something along those lines. And so, yeah, a couple of guys that wouldn't claim to be probably substance dualists were using that language. And so I guess the last thing, you know, something I wrote down here is we were talking about how our memories can change, but memories, how do I want to say this? Memory changes, but the owner of the memories doesn't. And if that's the case, I think the best explanation of that truth is the existence of a soul. And so I would highly recommend a book called The Creation of Self by a guy named Joshua Ryan Farris. And
that's a great book. Yeah, actually, you can see it right there.
That's right.
That's the picture. Right. Yeah, you should buy that book. Yes, The Creation of Self. There's no other book quite like it.
I agree. Fantastic book. Probably the only books that might surpass it are the ones that we're co-authoring together.
Oh. Yes.
Well, we've got one that we're co-authoring, one that we're co-editing, and that one's going to be amazing. And it's all related to this kind of stuff, but it
is. We're motivating an argument that has been underappreciated in both academic and popular discourse. Now, yes, that's
Take
right.
It away.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And my most popular book, popularly written, is coming out this summer, called Why Souls? Why Souls? Isn't that a great title? I think it's a good title. I don't know. Why Souls? But I think, this is a good discussion. This was fun. I really enjoyed listening to Alex O'Connor and whatever that guy's name is, Michael Stevens, VSauce. You should definitely put that in the title, VSauce. But I think the theme that kept coming up in our discussions, there were lots of threads here. It was a very thought-provoking engagement between the two of them that were suggestive of some deeper issues that hopefully we brought out here that needed to be brought out regarding something like a soul being true. But I think one of the big themes that kept persisting was awareness is something that comes and goes. Present awareness comes and goes. But the subject of that awareness must persist, it seems. It certainly seems that way commonsensically. It certainly seems that way intuitively, in a way that is deep. But I think maybe when we have good evidence for believing that is the case. Experiences themselves, thoughts about our present awareness requires someone who has them, an enduring someone that is certainly deeper than brain states. And Alex O'Connor and VSauce certainly moved in that direction and moved beyond parts and brain states to maybe something like a continuity or something else that was deeply mysterious that they never identified. But we would say that this is why the person is best understood as a soul, as the undergirding thing that makes sense of it. So I think that's an important theme that needs to be highlighted in their discussion.
I think that ties a bow on it. Thank you, Dr. Farris, for joining us. Yes, Tim, you said he could have the final word.
Did,
and now you're going to take the final word.
It's just that
you're going to steal the thunder. Huh?
Yeah.
It's just that I've got fuzzy brain right now.
Actually, my drink helped me. Yeah, it helped me. Yeah, my brain is a lot less fuzzy now.
It is.
You're going to have to hook
less
me up.
Fuzzy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
More of those mushrooms or something.
Mushrooms, not psychedelic mushrooms.
Oh, okay.
I must clarify that. Yeah.
Okay.
Functional mushrooms.
All right. Well, hopefully you all found this conversation helpful. And we do encourage you to watch that full video with Alex O'Connor and VSauce. Check out soulscienceministries.com, freethinkingministries.com. And as we always say here at Free Thinking Ministries,
stay reasonable.